It's not just journalists kind of wanting to amplify things. It's also that the government is trying to control a news flow.
If, because he wants the Nobel Peace Prize so much, Donald Trump actually affects any of those outcomes, I'd say give it to him.
There you go.
Wow, I was not expecting that, Harriet.
Hello and welcome to Electoral Dysfunction from Sky News with me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Ruth Davidson.
And me, Harriet Harman.
And welcome to a very special Q&A episode from us. Thank you for sending in all of your questions. We're going to get through as many as we can today.
And remember to send us more on the burner phone. Just WhatsApp us on 07934 200 444, or you can always email us on electraldysfunction@sky.uk.
And it's worth saying that we're recording this at the end of July, but it's a little summer treat for you all. And as you are listening to this, I'm hopefully, if everything goes according to plan, in a swimming pool. Lucky me. I've got a dream.
As people across the nation just switch off and go,
they're just like, oh, shut up, Beth. Shut up, you smug git. Shut up.
Now, most important question, are you going for a one-piece or a two-piece?
Oh,
swimmer?
always, ever since the children, Ruth, it's a one-piece for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
To be honest, actually, Beth, do you
Yeah.
know, more likely, I'm going to Ireland, so more likely wetsuit.
Oh, you'll be in a wetsuit. You'll be in a wetsuit under an umbrella. Enjoy it. And that's not a sun. That's not a parasol, babes.
No, it's not a parasol.
Well, look, so let's crack on with this. We have a Q&A session for you. I'm kind of like the MC on this because this is the Harriet and Ruth show, and I'm very happy because I've got half a croissant I need to finish eating, so this is good. First up is Sue.
Hi there. I have a question about ex-MPs. When someone wins Wimbledon, they're made a member for life and get free centre court tickets every year. Do ex-MPs get a lifetime House of Commons pass? Are they allowed in? Are the corridors swamped with sad-looking Etonians turning up for a cheap pint? Or is that it? They're out, barred, never coming in again. Thanks.
Well, I'm very overexcited, overstimulated by this question from Sue, because all things to do with the institution of Parliament, no matter how detailed, I find me, I've got to sort myself out on this. But anyway, Sue, the whole thing about being an MP is it's very like institutional living. It's where, you eat, you socialise as well as work, and therefore it is very brutal if suddenly the voters decide to chuck you out. And MPs are given a pass for life afterwards to come into the House of Commons, but there's certain areas that they can't actually go into. But actually, one of the things that can be done is, like, for example, with Boris Johnson, after the Privileges Committee inquiry, which I chaired, we proposed to Parliament that he be denied his life pass as part of his punishment for misleading the House of Commons. So it's a privilege which you can have. It lets you go to some parts of the House of Commons, but not all. And then, of course, there's the former MPs who are in the House of Lords, who were allowed supposedly to go into the tea room and the bars and things like that. But actually, we don't, because we know we've had our time. It's the new ones who are in there. We can't be sitting there having our big full English breakfast when they're needing to have their full English breakfasts.
On Big Beasts of Parliament or Parliament Past, I remember this thing about Boris Johnson and the Privilege Committee and his pass and being suspended. He then resigned as an MP, didn't he? So does he not have a pass? Can Boris Johnson not go into the Commons?
No, one of the sanctions against him for misleading the House of Commons was that he wouldn't get the normal privilege of having a pass for life from the House of Commons. So he hasn't got that. So you're not going to bump into him in Portcullis House or any of the other places in and around Parliament.
That must have made him furious, do you think?
I don't know. I think that, the House of Commons thought it was appropriate that him having done such a bad thing to Parliament, i.e. misleading Parliament, he wasn't entitled to the privilege of coming back there.
There you go. There you go, Sue.
So there's some other stuff as well. Well, I can give you additional information if that's even at all possible to what Harriet has provided, which is, one, on the Wimbledon side, you don't have to win it to be allowed to have tickets every year and be invited back. You only have to be a quarter finalist. It's called the last eight club, you get those privileges. But in terms of Parliament itself, also other parliaments can have reciprocal arrangements. MEPs, when we were still in Europe, used to be able to get a parliamentary pass for the Commons, and MPs could get a reciprocal pass if they applied for the devolved administrations, or certainly for Holyrood, and you're able to get in and out. Now, I completely, on brand, am entitled to a former MSP's pass for Holyrood, but because Billy, who's the guy that's done security there, I think since it opened in 1999, only does your pictures for your pass every second Tuesday morning of a blue moon between the hours of 10 and 10:30. I've never actually applied for it. So every time I go back, or any time I go back to Holyrood, I have to like queue up and go through, the scanners and all the rest of it. And I don't mind, because actually most of the security staff are still there. So I'd like have a nice chat on my way in. But I am technically entitled to a pass. I just have never claimed one.
But you know, when I was first an MP, there was no such thing as MPs' passes. No such thing as security staff. Literally, anybody, members of the public, MPs, would just walk in and out. And the police officers who were there to actually tell people where to go, not to keep people out. The security landscape since then has absolutely transformed.
Well, there you go.
And that's the point of central lobby, isn't it? The history of central lobby is that everybody has the right to see their MP. And in the olden days, before you had the sort of mass transport that meant you could always get home for your constituency surgery, you could go home on a Thursday night for your constituency surgery on a Friday. If you were in London and wanted to see your MP, you were allowed to just come in and stand in central lobby and sort of grab them on the way out the chamber.
You put in a little green card. You'd come into central lobby, put in a little green card, and the House of Commons staff would give it to your MP, a little green card saying, X, your constituent is waiting to see you in central lobby. And that's how it used to work. But the security threat has just changed, ramped up over the years. So it's a shame that's not possible anymore.
Well, when I was a kid, you could get into Downing Street right up to the door. They've got a fence now at the edge. You've seen it on the TV. You see those railings. Those railings didn't used to exist.
And you could put a petition through the letterbox. And have your photograph taken on the doorstep.
Oh, the good old days.
Like William Hague did. Do you remember that picture of William Hague on the doorstep of Number 10 because he wanted to be Prime Minister?
Oh, and he bid to become the leader of the opposition,
never
but
the
alas,
Prime Minister.
it was not to be. Now he's the head of Oxford University, isn't he?
Yeah.
Am I going mad?
No, you are. He won the election.
He's Chancellor.
Yeah, Chancellor.
That's one election he did win.
Yeah, there you go. Who knew that this question would go here? I mean, goodness me.
God, they can't shut us up. We can't shut ourselves up this morning, can we?
We've completed our Q&A.
Thank you for your questions, Sue.
I'm gonna big up William Hague, because in terms of thoughtfulness and people that I think have grown out of the pastiche that they once were, like just people that have gained respect through hard work, I think William Hague is one of them.
Yeah.
And in terms of his work, particularly on violence against women and girls when he was at the Foreign Office, did a really good job. And leaders that you wish you might have had or prime ministers you wish you might have had rather than ones that actually made it.
Yeah, he was the one that put the question of sexual violence against women in conflict and in war on the public agenda with Angelina Jolie.
There you go. Okay, well, look.
Okay,
right,
next up, it's Sean. A question for Ruth and me, I think.
So Sean says, "Hi ladies, with Reform's latest defection from the Tories announced, I wanted to know if you think these people jumping ship are just chancers and that they're trying to be in the winning party. And if so, do you think that the Tories should wipe their hands with them if they try to jump back if Reform plunge in the polls?"
Oh, I think that's one for you, Ruth, rather than me.
Yeah, I mean, I think defections come in a couple of different categories, don't they? There's people that have felt for a long time that their party is moving further and further from where their values are. And there comes a point or an issue where they just think in good conscience, I don't fit anymore. My mum might have brought me up to dance with the person that brought me, but I no longer feel like I can be honest with myself and comfortable with myself in this vehicle. And the decision that you then have is, do I join another vehicle, or do I decide to sit as an independent, or do I resign and stop doing professional politics? And I think that there, for all the chat that people have about politicians never believing in anything, you would be surprised how many people wrestle with their conscience on certain issues and how many doubts that there are. And actually, dare I say it, politicians can be quite thoughtful and quite philosophical people. It's just you don't always see that when we're shouting at each other at PMQs. In terms of this particular issue, it's funny because the kind of conservatism that I represent, I think, is very far from reform. But there are some people within the Conservative Party that see almost the conservative reform spectrum as a continuum. And that actually one bleeds into the other, and there may even be a bit of crossover in it. I don't see it like that. That's not my particular type of actually liberal unionism, which is where the Conservatives grew up in Scotland. We grew from the liberal unionist tradition. So I would have a real difficulty with that. In terms of these people, I'm not sure if people came back, they would be accepted back into the Tories or not. But for me, I think they are very different parties, and it's no different to if you cross the floor to join Labour or the Lib Dems, and you generally don't get back in what you've left.
I was thinking about this the other day because I've been up to interview Andrea Jenkins, who's now the new Greater Lincolnshire Reform Mayor. She was a former Conservative minister, close ally of Johnson. She defected, and her view was that the Conservative Party had moved too far away from what she thought were her Conservative values. That was her view, and she talked about low taxation in particular. I then pointed out that Reform were actually, on one side, sort of socially conservative, but being quite left, more left when it came to economics. The reason I brought it up, Ruth, was I was thinking when I was interviewing her or talking to her, I wasn't really interviewing, we were just chatting, about, it was only a year and a half ago, so Tory party conference of 2023, when Rishi Sunak had become Prime Minister. Nigel Farage was there. They were doing this, Make Britain Great Again, sort of think tank campaign group within the Conservative Party. Farage was in there, dancing with Priti Patel, now the shadow Foreign Secretary. Liz Truss was on the front row. Jacob Rees-Mogg was on the front row, and some other Conservatives. And isn't it a world away from a Conservative Party back in October 2023 that was playing footsie, if you like, with Farage? And there was all talk about a tie-up, etc., etc. And now it's kind of post that brutal election in which the Conservatives realised that the Reform Party were coming for them in what could be quite an existential threat, that now it is a situation of both parties being deeply opposed to each other. Do you find that interesting, Ruth, like the journey that the two have been on?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, but I find more interesting when you were talking about the kind of cast of characters at that Conservative Party conference. I find what's more interesting and for me more alarming, the journey from a Conservative Party conference where you had David Cameron as leader, you had Justine Greening, you had Greg Clark, you had Dominic Grieve, you had all these, you had, as we've just talked about, William Hague, you had all of these people, so you had a really broad tent. And yes, you had people like Liam Fox that were representing the right of the party, who, the idea that we've gone from such a broad church to now fighting in such a kind of almost on such a small patch of ground over immigration and kind of fighting on issues and the attack that Kemi's getting from within the party, or he would say that he's trying to be supportive, but in terms of the challenge she's getting from within the parties from Robert Jenrick, it's all on this really narrow patch of land. And if you look at the broad swathes of policy that's out there that affects people in economics, in business, in social care, in public services, in education, in opportunities for young people, we could fight on any ground. And the fights that we're choosing to have right now are on this really, really narrow patch of ground where we're being outflanked on the right and we're drifting ever further towards there. And it makes me sad as somebody that believes in big tent conservatism. And to be fair to Boris Johnson, who, as you know, I hold very little time for, he did at least appoint people to his cabinet that were of very, very wide and disparate views that came from both edges.
But isn't part of the problem that what has remained as the... Sorry, Harriet, to interrupt, but part of the problem for the Conservatives now is what has remained as the rump of the party, the 121 MPs. Are they disproportionately from the right, those traditional... die-in-the-wall Conservative seats? I don't know the answer to. I haven't actually done a poll on it, but is that part of the problem, that a lot of the wing of the party that you were in just doesn't exist within the parliamentary party anymore?
Well, I think that there are individuals that happen to sit in those seats who have more liberal views. But I think when your party is under threat, and I think this happens to all parties, when you're reducing rather than expanding, you talk to your base to try and generate your base to come out for you.
Yeah.
You don't then talk to try and convert others who
Yeah.
have previously voted for other parties at different elections. And you kind of saw it under Corbyn as well. They fought in a very narrow patch of ground as well, and got swamped. Not the first election in 2017, but in 2019. They really struggled because by that point they'd been pigeonholed into a very, very left-wing party that was not talking to the whole country. And the lesson for politics in this country is that you have to, your air war, your broadcast war, it has to be open and accessible, and people have to feel that there's a place within your party and that you will represent them if you want to win. And at the moment, I think the Tory party just wants to survive. It doesn't look as if it wants to win. But we have slightly strayed from the question about defections. But it's still an interesting journey to catalogue, I think.
That's really, really interesting, Ruth. Do you see any fight back within the Tories? Is there any organised activity that we can't perceive, but which is about trying to move the party back into the centre ground? I can't kind of see it.
Yeah, so there is. So you've got the various groups and organisations that exist under sort of political banners, and you have them in Labour as well, different think tanks, so like Onward, and you've got groups like the Conservative Environmental Network, LGBT Tory, and all that sort of stuff. So you've got all of these groups that exist that are populated by people who are still of the more centre-right views rather than right views. But the difficulty they have is that they have that same sort of confliction that we saw a lot of parliamentarians under Corbyn have, like Jess, like Wes Streeting, etc., who want to be loyal to the party, that they want to support the leader, that they joined an organisation because they wanted to help the organisation and the vehicle of it, but they struggle with the fact that what the vehicle is espousing is not their own beliefs. So yeah, there is some intellectual work that's going on in terms of people like Neil O'Brien writing pamphlets, other MPs that are thinking about stuff, people like Tom Tugendhat that are trying to make balance in there. People that are wanting to, particularly in the culture wars that have been going on in the last few years, people that are wanting to be visible allies to the LGBT Tory sort of grouping. So yes, absolutely, there's still people that are of the centre-right. But remember, we're still shell-shocked. It's a year since we got absolutely annihilated at the election. We've just had that massive shift from government to opposition, which takes people's time to get their head round it. I think the party itself as an entity hasn't regrouped, never mind the various elements within the party. So, it'll take time, but we never used to have reform before. So when we got kicked out in 97, we were given time. We weren't being attacked on the right as well as the left. We had to find our own identity.
But actually, I was just remembering that Boris Johnson, ironically, was paving the way for the dominance of the right in the Tory party when he kicked out a whole swathe of senior centrist Tory MPs over Brexit. Do you remember he kicked out Ken Clarke, he kicked out David Gauke, a whole load of them, and that meant that the senior people that could have been a centrist centre of gravity within the Tory party had gone.
All right. Well, look, that was very interesting. I enjoyed that discussion. Lots of food for thought about reform v. the Conservatives, something we're going to be coming back to a lot next year. But for the moment, we're going to go to an ad break.
Right, next up, we have a question for Raman. She says, the next general election isn't for another 4 years, yet the news cycle sounds and feels as though we have an imminent election and we're just waiting for the lectern outside 10 Downing Street. My thoughts are that we have a media and a commentariat class that are used to talking about endless political chaos post-Brexit. What are your thoughts, and why do we keep talking about an election that is 4 years away?
I've got lots of thoughts about this. The first thing to say is I think you do have a point. I do think that there has been years of political turmoil, and the kind of the media class, if you like, have got used to living through turmoil. And then when you think things are going to settle down a bit, there is a sort of blank sheet where you think, oh, so we're not going to do as much politics. Maybe we're going to talk a bit more about policy. And that is an adjustment. So I can sort of I empathise with you a bit, or I can understand what you're saying, that the media class being used to this endless political chaos, and they kind of are a bit addicted to it. I can sort of see that point, and I can see why it looks like that. The counterpoints to that, I've got three things to say about that. The first is that the media environment has changed a lot in the past decade through the sort of the revolution that is social media and digital consumption, and a proliferation of the way in which we consume news and platforms that need to be fed. So when I first started out in journalism 1,000 years ago, we made a newspaper, we put it together, we printed it, we'd wait for the headlines to drop at 10 p.m. Your scoop would go in the, if you got one, would go, go on the front page, and that would generate a news cycle. We now live in a world where we have 24 hours, 7 days a week news cycles, and a machine that is moving constantly, with constant news flow, and not just from here, but also globally, that we are in a much more interconnected world. So I think the environment has changed, and in a way the media has responded to that by kind of filling the growing bucket of which people are consuming news, or news is being produced and broadcast from. We don't live in a world where you have, 3 linear channels and everyone tunes into the news at 10 or the news at 6. So I think there's a different beast to feed, point one. The second thing is that whether you are 1 year out from election, or 3 years out from election, or 4 years out from election, politicians need to feed the space as well. So I think there's competition to be heard, and I think that sort of drives the news agenda. So it's not just journalists kind of wanting to amplify things. It's also that a government is trying to control a news flow, and then you have competition from Reform and the Conservatives and other people trying to find their space. And then number three, I think that there is still a lot more political chaos than I thought there would be, and that has driven news, and that has driven a sense of this endless political chaos didn't just stop with a landslide election victory, and that has been partly driven by a government that has itself mismanaged itself in some ways. So all the drama around Sue Gray in the first 100 days, the chief of staff. You then had Trump coming in, and that was another whirlwind in which a lot of political chaos has been created. And then you have other events that are happening, such as the welfare bill, which politically could have been managed better, and I think people in Number 10 would say that, but it was mismanaged, and that also creates a sense of chaos. So I'm not disagreeing with you that there is a political class, be it politicians or media actually, that have got used to sort of being, on a drip feed of the sugar rush of constant political instability and chaos. But I think there's other underlying factors that are still driving a lot of the news agenda. Does that seem fair? Anyone disagree with me?
I think all that's very true, but I think it's worth remembering that still most people don't really think about politics.
That's true.
Until it comes to the general election, albeit that having been said, we have got Welsh and Scottish elections next year. So I think mostly people don't think about politics until it comes to the fact that they've got to cast their vote. And often if they are thinking about politics, it's because something bad is happening that's intruding on them getting on with their lives. But we're very different from everybody else in that, well, certainly I am. I think about politics all the time. Obviously, it's changed the DNA in my brain being in politics. So it's like it's whirring around the entire time.
I agree, Harriet, that most people, they couldn't tell you who the transport minister is. They don't think about politics every day of their life. But I do think that there are national moods and national trends, and people have a sense of whether the government is doing well, whether the country's doing well or not, or whether they're dissatisfied. And I think one of the reasons that the pitch of the coverage is a bit more as if we're still in a kind of electoral battle rather than one's just been settled for a long time, is because we have a recent history where elections weren't settled. So it is unusual to have a series of elections in 2015, 2017, 2019, like we had.
Yeah, that's true.
So we are used to, oh, well, they say it's going to last 5 years, but is it really?
That's a really good point, Ruth. And also, even if I think about what you're saying in terms of the past 5 years and how I've reported it, I mean, I remember sitting in a studio in 2019 when Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority, and we were all there saying he's changed the political landscape, he's redrawn the political map, he's taken a load of seats from Labour, he's managed to put together a Brexit coalition, he's going to probably govern for 2 terms. And then it was like, building a house of cards on the sand. It all collapsed and fell away, and a mix of a pandemic and Boris Johnson's own way of governing, etc. So we don't need to go haul over the old coals of that. But the point is, I think you're right, Ruth, is that now there's a kind of scepticism about the rules that you thought governed post-war politics or how first past the post worked. That they kind of got thrown up in the air with Johnson. The only other thing I would say, going back to Raman's point, is that I do think that social media, Twitter, constant online live rolling blogs, the way in which the even in the past sort of 7-8 years, the way in which we present political news. You go onto a website now, and every single twist and turn of a Labour rebellion, for example, is being played out in live blogs and rolling news. So everything gets amplified. But I think that's a feature. I don't think that's necessarily a feature of journalists, as you said, how did you put it, kind of being used to the endless political chaos. I think it's actually part of bigger, broader structural changes in media and the way in which we consume not just news, but the way in which we consume information, right?
There isn't a story that's being told alongside the individual actions of this government. And I think that's a problem for the government, that they've not given us this umbrella, this philosophy, this guiding light of what the country's going to look like in 5 or 10 years to hang all of these different policies off. And that creates a problem, because then people don't have that sense that the government knows where it's going. They don't have that sense that, we're moving in the right direction. Right. And the worry for you and me is that come the next election, people think, well, we've tried the Tories and we tried Labour and we didn't really like either. We might as well give reform a go. And that's for somebody from the Conservative Party, from somebody from the Labour Party like you, Harriet. The worry is that actually government, and you see this when people go from, and the difficulties they have when they go from opposition to government, is government is really hard.
Both Labour and the Conservatives are kind of understanding, or they're certainly saying to me, politicians in both those parties, that they really have to begin to try and take on reform in terms of their actual policies and try to debunk some of the things that they're promising and put them under scrutiny. So I think that's probably going to be a feature of 2026 as we go into those elections in May. But look, we've got another question here, which I can't wait to see what you two say about this. I sort of think I might be able to guess. This one's from Lisa. It's nice and short, but oh so complicated. Read this, Beth. Okay, ready? Should Donald Trump be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? Who wants to go off first on that one?
Well, I want to see peace in Ukraine, a just peace with Putin pushed back. I want to see an end to the absolute horrific slaughter in Gaza and the hostages returned. I'd like to see peace in Sudan, which is an absolutely horrific conflict. And if, because he wants the Nobel Peace Prize so much, Donald Trump actually affects any of those outcomes, I'd say give it to him.
There you go.
Wow. I was not expecting that, Harriet. I was not expecting that. I actually, in a weird way, I kind of agree. And if he does manage to sort things out and have a just end to conflicts in all of the various hotspots around the world, anyone that can manage that and use the convening power of the Oval Office to do it deserves to have it, irrespective of what you think of them themselves. But I'm going back through some of the recipients: the International Committee of the Red Cross, Dag Hammarskjöld, the first UN Secretary General, Martin Luther King, and then there's some others in there that you think, really? People like Kissinger, people like Woodrow Wilson, again, two Americans there. So it's not always people like Mother Teresa, who did win it back in the 70s. It is people that do hard things. I think in terms of people that have won it, that are my favourites, if you're allowed to have them. I really love those mothers from Northern Ireland that won it. I remember when was it the 80s or the 90s, who'd come from different parts of the sectarian divide in Northern Ireland and had worked incredibly hard to put their communities back together after the Troubles. But also, like, I have a warm and abiding love for Mikhail Gorbachev, who was such a big figure when I was growing up. And if you think now of the pressures within his country, what he managed to do by working with Reagan, with Thatcher, with others, the absolute transformation that he managed to effect in his nation. I mean, he's the sort of person that absolutely deserves to have it. I don't know. I think it is unlikely that Donald Trump is going to manage to reach those heights.
And it's been a bit nauseating, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is doing such an appalling slaughter, which is heading up to nearly 60,000 in Gaza, people killed, mostly women and children, civilians, that he's put in a nomination for Trump to the Nobel Peace Prize committee.
So where have we landed? Is that a no, really, from all of us?
I think wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if he can do he's already flunked his own test. He was going to bring peace to Ukraine within the first 100 days of his presidency. The first 100 days have been and gone, and we're no closer to it. The drone strikes are if anything, amplifying. But if he can, then absolutely, fair play. Anyone that can bring peace to the Middle East deserves a bloody peace prize, and can stop an expansionist, irredentist Russia deserves a peace prize. But the indications are not that he is going to be successful in the remaining 3.5 years of his presidency, and that's all we have.
Let's wrap up there. So if you have any more burning questions, send them to our burner phone. The number to WhatsApp is 07934 200 444, or you can always email electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. Keep sending them in. We like answering them, even when they're hard. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.